Hello everyone, my name is Colton Davis and this is Kalulu Talks. So today we're going to do something a little different. It will be seen on YouTube and Rumble. I was doing research and I was going to talk about corporation corruption, but unfortunately after seeing it get to about 15 segments of notes, I was like, this will take 3 days to bloody record. And I've been trying to record it for the last couple days, but really haven't had much of an opportunity to do so. So to try to keep the schedule relative, I decided that I'll just record it like this. We have 2 segments a day. And we're going to be talking about essentially just culture in general. I want to talk about Oklahoma culture a little bit, or at least what I'm seeing it turn into. I don't even know if that's a good way of titling this video, but I've noticed something very strange with census information, and I kind of figured I'd mention it. Because I've been researching the census for about a year now, and I've noticed something very interesting, and I'm kind of curious if anyone has any ideas as to what's going on, or if my theories might be true. Maybe, who knows? I'm just throwing a shot out there. But I'm also here to make an announcement today. YouTube, I got good news for you. I won't be excluding you from bonus segments anymore. This will be the last video that gets a bonus segment and you're left out of. Why? Because YouTube, you're going to go ahead and start getting a brand new kind of type of video. I want to start posting video game content again on the YouTube channel, but it's not going to be gaming like we were doing. No, it's going to be talking about the culture of gaming and how it impacts day-to-day life, and if it's relevant. Like, I think our first video I'm going to talk about is like Night of the Woods. So that's going to be fun. As for Rumble, you'll get the bonus segment today, and you'll continue getting these more cultural-related videos, because they do better here on Rumble than they would in YouTube anyway. So with that being said, YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Rumble, like, comment, and follow. And let's go ahead and begin with our first segment today. So I have no notes. I'm speaking on top of my head. Like I said, it was going to be way too difficult to do the other thing I was wanting to talk about. So I'm just going to talk about the experiences I've had while joyriding and something I've noticed along with census information. So, about a year ago, I started researching census information. I started researching, put that right there, got a little mouse pad moving like crazy. But no, I started researching population, essentially, because I noticed something weird. Ever since the inflationary period happened, the smaller communities in the state of Oklahoma are shrinking in number. This made sense to me at the time because I was thinking that they're just simply leaving and heading to areas like Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Claremore. You know, communities are actively growing and have tons of opportunity. In times of economic hardship, you can expect this result. Except for I noticed small communities that are around these other successful communities were also starting to grow, despite the fact that millennials do not have as many babies on average, as well as Gen Z, and the fact that everyone's having economic hardship at the time, so I'm just scratching my head going, okay, now it's not making much sense. And I got a couple theories as to what might be going on. But I ran through some stuff first, some things that definitely are not it, now that I think about it. For first off, when you study culture, especially in Oklahoma, you have to understand that it's part of something called the Bible Belt. The Bible Belt is essentially a couple of states, Texas, Oklahoma, and a few others, which kind of takes up the center lower portion of the South. Alright, well, the South as a whole is essentially from Appalachia all the way down through Texas and all the way to the right of Florida. That's typically what's considered the South. However, when we talk about the South in general, you usually omit Oklahoma because Oklahoma is technically not considered a part of the South. Not part of the Midwest either, but some people call it that as well. So, if Oklahoma is not considered a part of the South, and it's not considered a part of the Midwest, it's actually considered part of the center. It's a center state, is what it is. But most people know it as the Bible Belt. It is the biggest portion of the Bible Belt, I believe, and it definitely holds the most prominent when people think about what the Bible Belt is. And the Bible Belt is essentially just a group of states that has a very strong religious culture, especially when it comes to Southern Baptism. There's a few other denominations in here as well, but it's definitely the Baptist that takes the cake on that. And when we're talking about Oklahoma culture, you need to understand that in the very northern parts of it, and if anyone needs a reference, Veneta is a good example. Veneta, Welsh, Oklahoma, start at those two states and then stretch it across the entire Kansas border line. That is where the Rust Belt culture bleeds into Oklahoma. That's also where the Bible Belt culture bleeds into the Rust Belt. What is the Rust Belt then? We need to talk about this when we're talking about Oklahoma. The Rust Belt starts at Kansas and it goes essentially all the way up, all the way around the Grand Lakes and things like that. But it does not hit New York and all of them. And thus, Kansas, the Appalachian areas, it kind of acts as the dividing line between the Bible Belt and the Rust Belt. It's the dividing line between the South and the North. It's a very interesting thing that needs to be researched, especially for people who are interested in understanding a deep dive on what culture is down this part of the nation. And as I've grown older, I've actually become more fond of the Belt cultures than I have the Southern or Northern cultures, due to the fact that the Belt cultures, in my opinion, are a lot more unique. Like, if you go down to Texas, you'll find your Texans and your rednecks as you would anywhere else, but only in Oklahoma will you find Crazy Okies at, which makes it very special in my opinion. Now, with that being said, another thing we need to look at is how do these cultures bleed into each other? So, the way they bleed into each other is that they don't actually bleed fully into each other. You will notice, however, that there are aspects that both sides, and essentially all small towns in this local area, actually have in common. One is the brick and mortar idea of it. You're going to see a lot of towns, not just in Oklahoma, not just in the Kansas area, but all across the United States, have kind of this brick look to them. A lot of small towns do because of the history that it has. Now, not all of them do, but a large portion of them do. That is one way you could look at it, but when we're talking about the Bible Belts and the Rust Belt, and of course how they actually bleed into each other, you actually have to start looking in that Veneta and Welch, Oklahoma area I've mentioned. And I call them states, they're not states, they're towns, you can make fun of me later. But, the reason why I mentioned that is that they kind of start from there and they start bleeding into the Kansas area a little bit. This is because the southern part of Kansas is kind of the strongest church-going area of the entirety of Kansas. This is because it's bled from Oklahoma into it. Like, Oklahoma has bled that church-going mentality there. There is a very strong church culture in that very southern part of Kansas. But at the same time, in the northern part of Oklahoma, where we meet the borderline of Kansas, you'll see a strong reliance on coal still. And don't get me wrong, coal actually gets shipped all over Oklahoma, but there is a strong need and desperation in that area that is only unique to the Rust Belt. You see stronger support for local businesses. In Oklahoma, on average, the southern parts of it, the center to southern parts of it, on average does not support local business as much as, let's say, these northern towns do. Like, when you drive in Veneta, a good example of this is they actually have currently a LED screen temporary set up near the town center, which states to shop locally, support local businesses, things like that. You'll see a few stores and things have flyers and stuff passed out from time to time. You see a little bit of that in Welsh as well, because it's a smaller community, not as much. But the idea of supporting your local communities do in fact exist in these areas. And that is exclusively, shockingly, a culture you see from the very, very desperate Rust Belt cultures, which we see up in Kansas and things like that. So, coal dependence and desperation is what we get from the Rust Belt, and the Rust Belt gets a lot of our church-going culture, which is very, very strange. I don't know what else we give to the Rust Belt, but I'm sure we do give something to them, and I'm sure that those two factors are not the only things we get from the Rust Belt either. The terrain starts changing as you head into that area a little bit. Not as strong as the rest of the state, because Oklahoma as a whole, for the most part, is somewhat diverse. It's mostly plains and forest, fields, and things like that. You see a few prairies and things like that as well. Hills are very big in Oklahoma. But as you head up there, you start getting a little bit of that as well. But Kansas, for the most part, has kind of the same terrains as you would see down here. Although they do push more for corn. I will give this that. They have a lot more corn operation in Kansas than what you have here in Oklahoma. And that's kind of how they bleed into each other. But if I keep talking about the Rust Belt and the Bible Belt forever, we're not going to get to the point of this segment. And the reason why I want to mention all this is because I've noticed that communities are in fact shrinking, and they're starting to fill up more into the larger city areas. Something that we've seen happen in the Rust Belt before it was called the Rust Belt. And why? Well, back then it was due to the fact that there was a big influx in work due to the fact that it was a strong coal community. It's called the Rust Belt because when the coal communities collapsed, that's when it got its name. It was once an industrial belt that collapsed and turned into essentially rust. And the thing is, in Oklahoma, we invested in oil instead of coal more than anything. Although we did invest in coal as well, it is for the most part mostly a oil-driven state. We literally have a plaque in one of the airports. Well, maybe it's not a plaque, it's more of like a memorial of just drillers. There are literally parts of Oklahoma where we've like idolized the oil rig workers from long times ago. And I'm pretty sure there's some areas in the Rust Belt that does that as well, or has memorials from when the golden age of the coal mining industry was really big. And the reason why is because these industries have essentially built the states that they are now known as. In fact, I think we even named a baseball team or something after the operations. I think Tulsa Drillers is what we call them. Yeah, because we call them drillers for the oil drillers from way back when. So now let's ask the question, why is it that these smaller communities in Oklahoma, this weird information on the census I've noticed, is so bizarre? Why is it that these communities are shrinking? Well, there's a few factors that it could be. On one hand, we are in an inflationary period. Maybe they're just leaving these small communities and going where there's better work. And yeah, that is a possibility. Except for we're seeing the communities in these areas that are also equal in size to these other small towns increase as well. It seems to be something exclusive to this one part of Oklahoma. This region is the Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Claremore City kind of location. So it gets to the rest of the communities then. What's going on with the rest of Oklahoma? Why is it shrinking? Well, remember when I mentioned that it's starting to show symptoms of what happened to the Rust Belt? So here's the concern I have. For me, driving around and joyriding all this time, I've noticed that, well, I think we're about to become the next big Rust Belt. And I think it's happening due to a different reason. You see, what caused the Rust Belt to become the Rust Belt was the sudden disappearance of their Golden Age material, which for them was coal. And it wasn't quite the disappearance, it was more so a forced regulation from government officials and protests and all that stuff, which actually caused their Golden Age to close and ultimately start being called the Rust Belt that they are known as today. But Oklahoma, known as the Bible Belt, I think they're on a similar path, but for a different reason. And we're starting to see early symptoms of it. I think that due to the fact that inflation is so bad, it is actually causing people to leave these smaller communities to go into these bigger communities, which will mean that the upper right and, of course, center right part of the state will probably be okay whenever the collapse happens, but the rest of it, I believe, will be permanently damaged. And I'm not saying that the upper right and center right will be okay, because they actually won't be. They'll be better off than the rest, because once a financial collapse does occur, they'll get hit hard as well. But because this is due to the fact of inflation, once deflation happens, it is inevitable that these areas will probably recover better, while the smaller towns are going to have a harder time doing so. So it's a little different. While as the Rust Belt, it fell due to the lack of coal, Oklahoma will fall due to a lack of trust. As younger individuals, such as millennials and Gen Z, leave small towns to join the big city for better job opportunities, we will see a collapse, and probably one will hurt us just as bad in the long term. Why? Well, it's going to collapse anyway regardless, but it's going to hurt the smaller towns doubly as there's less of a population to carry on the next generation of these townies. Which means probably going to be a lot more ghost towns relatively within the next 50, 60 years. Now, does this concern me too much? Am I like super panicked over it? I'm gonna be honest, no, not really. Because I do believe these towns will survive. But another reason why I'm concerned, though, is because when you look at the census information, you'll notice that these towns that are shrinking, on average, their median age is around 40-year-olds. That's not a good sign, ladies and gentlemen. When the people who are middle-aged are now your biggest demographic in a lot of your towns, it means there's not enough young people to hold the weight once they're too old to be able to take care of themselves anymore. Which means the future economy will be essentially fueled by nursing homes essentially alone. I'm sorry I'm laughing at that, but that is nightmare fuel. Goodness gracious, there's going to be so many nursing homes. So if small town communities do survive, it's because they chose to build nursing homes in them. Ooh. So yeah, that's an idea to survive small towns. If you're struggling economically right now, definitely something to look into is nursing homes. But in all seriousness, I do believe this isn't even 100% likely. It could be just me trying to make a good doom and gloom piece because I couldn't do my 15 segment long corporations getting worse piece, which is probably more definitely like it. Now, that being said, I don't want this segment to be too long. I do need to get to bed soon, so YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time with a unique video made just for you. And Rumble, we're going to go into the bonus segment now. The bonus segment's going to be pretty interesting. We're going to be talking about just something right off topic. But yeah, anyway, YouTube, I'll see y'all next time.